Welcome to Standout Authors Unbound. Today I have on Faith Clarke. Faith is an organizational culture and teamwork specialist and is committed to helping business leaders cultivate a values-infused, inclusive culture where people feel like they belong so they can deliver on their business and social impact promises. She's also a published researcher and author of the Amazon bestseller, Parenting Like a Ninja, as well as the co-host of the Feminist Founders podcast. Faith, that's a lot of amazing things that you're up to. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing?
Hi, Kevin. Well, thanks so much for having me. I more about the work. I like to tell people that what I do is help people in organizations, people better. And so, whether it's in teamwork, some of my work with teams, some of my work with nonprofits, or even my work with leaders, I'm really committed to the health of the human and what's required, what kind of environments help you spend 10 hours at work. And so to be in a space where that work is stripping your energy, extractive, it's you have to be pretending, you're wearing a ton of masks, you're being mistreated, or it's all of that for 10 hours every day for life is, I feel it's cruel, And so part of my work is it feels like an ethical mandate to shift our relationship to work and to the people who work with us in spaces, and to invite us all into how can we be more human? How can we be more supportive? How can we be more nourishing? And therefore make not just the work happen, but that the people be well as the work is happening.
Hmm. And when did you discover this was something that needed to be done?
I think that so I have my oldest son has autism, and I think when you have a loved one that you're caring for that has a chronic illness, or if you have a chronic illness, you quickly figure out that the work systems and the societal systems weren't built for you. And so I knew parents in similar situations as me who had to choose between their job and caring for their child, or they'd send the child to school and then the teacher would call and say, Johnny is being aggressive. You have to come pick him up. And then the boss would say, you can't pick up. No, you can't leave. You just got
Mm-hmm.
here. And this conflict between the outside of work world and the work world felt ridiculous to me. Like, we are whole humans, and the expertise that you've invited me here to share is supported and nourished by my whole life. So if my kid, I can't be my best self for you if my kid needs me. And so I saw this kind of compartmentalization, this kind of dividing up of humans. You perform at work, but your mom is dying. Like, I recently had a conversation with a person whose boss was calling her while she was with her mom in hospice. And so my own engagement with my son from so early had me recognizing that most workspaces wanted to strip me of my care and for my child, as well as wanted to me to ignore the impact of caring for him on my life. So for example, I tell people I don't sleep at night. My son doesn't sleep at night. So I'm happy to be in a dialogue about when I can be in a meeting, but 8 o'clock in the morning is not the time. I found that workplaces, just because of my own situation, I found that workplaces are pretty rigid spaces. Things happen at a certain time, things happen a certain way. And then as my kids got older, I realized systems were designed for a certain kind of mind, a certain kind of brain. If you thought a certain way, if you reasoned a particular way, if those were the ways that were celebrated at work. But if you were neurovariant in any way, then it would lead you into problems at work. So workspaces were just not inclusive. And recognizing that, I was like, well, everybody deserves to work in ways that feel good to them, to be able to produce meaningful work and to not have huge barriers to overcome because of that. And it shouldn't be because you're born a particular way, have these huge barriers to overcome. So that meant the systems needed to change, to be able to integrate more humans in the system, not just a few. that the system
Mm,
is designed for.
yeah, I think we've built society so that there's only one way to look at things throughout. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, who you're working with. Everyone is supposed to live in this rigid box, and I'm not sure why. I mean, I think it. I know why people do it this way. It's because that's the best way to make money. But we're humans, and money is not everything, right? It's just a way that should support us in living versus the other way around. We shouldn't have to, you know, live to work, not work to live, right?
Agreed, agreed. And yet also, Kevin, part of the thing is that it's not really the best way to make money. It's the way we've been trained to make money. Because when we think about it, if the humans are the people, are the entities that are going to be creating, innovating, supporting, making decisions, etc., then it makes sense to care for the humans. Because we do this with machines. Like all these facilities that have robots doing stuff, nobody's in there mistreating the robots. People aren't kicking it around, throwing dirt on it, getting it wet. No, people are, they're like, what kind of environment does this technology need? Let's do it. So there is a hierarchy of human value that causes us to say most of the humans in the world don't deserve premium care. And because we say that in our mind somewhere, then we don't have to set work environments up that really support them. The work environments really offer premium care to the few at the top. And so for me, it's more of an ethical issue because if we cared for the humans like we cared for the robots, we would absolutely make more money.
Mm, yeah, it's just because I guess companies have been trained to think in the way that they have. And it's interesting that you bring up the fact that robots are treated better than people, because that's definitely the case. Big companies are laying people off right now, even though they receive like billions of dollars in tax cuts. So, what is it as a society that we can do to make it so that everyone can live in the best way that supports them versus that supports the growth of a business at the cost of all the humans that are working for the businesses.
Right. I think that I don't, I'm not in the business of convincing people to change their mind. So I do start working with people who already agree that we want to honor human value. I think there are a lot of people that are saying, yes, this is the right way to go. But because, like you've said, our society has run on this model and on this template for so long, it's like, how do we do it? And we do have a built-in fear of like, well, we're going to lose money. I don't know how to do it. This isn't the way I saw it done. This isn't how I've seen people treat other. Like, I don't know what to do. And so that's kind of where I come in because I help people hold on to their values. Most people will say they have values about inclusivity and they have values about integrity and all this good stuff. And I'm like, wonderful. What does this mean in terms of how we treat humans inside? Because most people have applied those values to how they treat clients. And so I tend to come in and challenge organizations now by saying the people inside are client number one. So how are we inviting them into the care that we invite our clients into? How do we make sure their lives are being impacted and shifted? How do we care for them? How do we hold them as an intention? And because I tend to think strategically, and like the engineering training has helped me to be able to say, all right, how do we move this from the individual level into the team level, into the organizational level? How do we build a strategy that's organizational that impacts the one person on the ground? And it's like, and most of us, the difficulty is often with, yeah, we have good values or we even have a great strategic plan, but we still don't know how that matters in the team meeting when one person is um, exhibiting a microaggression against another person. How do we shift our environment so these things don't happen or they happen less?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tricky thing. The interesting thing is this: the way that society has been set up has only been less than 200 years. The systems that we've created in this new society that we're currently living in has only been around since like the industrial age. So why we are stuck in this sort of mindset is kind of interesting. I'm not saying that prior to that it was better. It was probably worse, but in a different way, you know?
Yeah, I think that the some of the reasons that we're stuck is that we entered into a mindset that said the old is bad, the new is better. So what's happening in a lot of the spaces I now work in is that people are looking back at the old to extract the wisdom from it, and not the new old, but the old. Like, humans have been around for a while, and so what have our patterns been? What can we learn about how difference was integrated? Yes, there are societies that didn't integrate difference, but there are societies that did. And many of us have ancestors that have been in some of those societies if we're able to look back enough. And so one of the mental shifts has been, how do we honor the old that has been nourishing and good, and what elements of that do we want to bring in so that we can really support each other. I think one of the elements of just old humaning, or maybe timeless humaning, is storytelling. So on the one hand, our differences have been moralized because of new ideas, new meaning, in the past 500 years. Um, but what humans have always done is told stories and built empathy and built understanding and built caution through these narratives. And
Mm,
storytelling is one of the ways that shifts the slower but more permanent, stable part of the brain. So if I teach you a policy, don't, Kevin, no microaggressions, don't do that. This is what microaggressions are. Stop it. I'm programming, I'm giving you information for the fast acting kind of linear part of your brain. It's a very unstable part of your brain. You leave the room, you've headed off on the street, you hit some traffic, you've forgotten what I've said. The part of your brain that actually shifts in slow, stable, permanent ways is your experiential part. It's a part where your emotions live and where your stories live, and so when we use, part of what I do with clients is just to help us tell better stories, pull on our stories of the past that we didn't want and tell better stories about the future we want to create, and use those better stories to invite ourselves into the heart change that makes us more willing now to do the hard work of the behavior change.
yeah. If you do anything like present people with data, they'll be like, okay, gloss over it. But if you can tell them a story that they can relate to, I think that is the power that we've lost over time, especially now with things like social media, where everything is just like boom, 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 boom. You're just bombarded constantly with new information and data, and you're not really absorbing the concepts and ideas from the stories that people are trying to tell. So it's, I think, our the way to make it back to having empathy and stuff is to really dig deep into how we're all relatable together.
Yeah. Yeah, our emotional, we have to slow ourselves down enough to be in sync with each other on the emotional level.
Hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how you brought storytelling into the book that you wrote, and how you when was the point that you decided, I need to write this book, this is something that needed to be written?
Well, I, so I'll go back in time and just say I realized I needed to write because I was having an experience that needed to be expressed, and I couldn't figure out how to express it steadily enough. Like, I couldn't just be telling my best friend. It wasn't enough, and I could feel that in me. Um, and I wanted other people who potentially would be having this experience to have a reference point, to not feel alone. So in the early years of parenting my son, and at the same time I was choosing homeschooling and stuff like that, I I started blogging because it was just a way for me to say, hey, this is what we did today. And this is what I felt today. And last night I didn't sleep and I wondered about this and that. So I participated in a communal blog, and it was very helpful for me in terms of writing practice because I was committed to write twice a week. And so it taught me how to not overthink. And in many ways, I've lost that lesson, because I was like, oh, this needs to be live by tomorrow. So I turned on the thing blank screen and just spoke, to myself, and typed. So my book, the first thing I did when I decided to write the book was I was shifting my work from working with caregivers. I was training caregivers for families of kids with autism, and I was shifting into coaching the parents. So I decided that the book was a good way to signal that shift both to myself and my business and to my audience. But the first thing I did was just to go through all the blog posts I'd written. Half the book is blog posts. And I was able, having outlined the book and knowing what I wanted, the story about myself that I wanted to invite other people into, then I could look at how I'd written over years. And I grabbed example stories of those moments, example excerpts, and kind of dropped them in either as individual stories. So some of the parts of the book, it's there in maybe italics or something, just a snapshot story, or it's I've edited it and filled it out some more and made it into a section in a chapter. So that's to your original question. It was just stuff that needed to be expressed, but it was the writing practice that birthed the book, because I didn't have to then be saying, what am I going to say about this? I'm like, I've already said it somewhere. And I was able to pull several of those segments together.
Yeah. How did you come up with the arc of it? If it was it just themes, or is there a way to progress through the book so that it's an overarching, story on top of, the sections that you built out?
Yeah, over time, with my work with students, even as an academic, or in my work with clients, I'm trying to get from this is the crisis I'm in to this is where I want to go. So for me, with the book, it was about the crisis that I found myself in. By the time my son hit 7 or 8, I was in a state of panic, burnout. It felt unsustainable, and I had to shift things to be able to feel just good in my body and in my life again. And so as I moved from a place of I don't have energy to I have the energy that helps me live the life I want to live, I started, I went back to grad school. And so I got like official language for what I was doing. So, I'd learn, self-determination theory says da da da. And I was like, that's what I did. So what I basically did was map an arc from that place of felt like despair and exhaustion,
Mm.
and like a PTSD, into a feeling more energized and like settled in my life, and looked at some of the psychological principles of motivation and performance that I didn't know I was leaning into, but that's really what I lean into. And then talked to people through, what I was dealing with, what they're possibly dealing with if they're parents of kids with complex needs, validating it. And then also a process of how do you kind of say yes to yourself? Because often that burnout comes from that place of I'm gonna fix everybody. I'm particularly going to help my child. And it's a lot of external expression and not enough or no internal tending. And so it's about that arc for internal tending to then help myself have the strength for the external expression that fit me. So it was built on self-awareness, self-knowledge, so that then my care for my kids, in the case of this book, care for my kids, would be a yes to me. And a core principle of my work is that there is no zero sum game. Let's not play it. There is no yes here in a context that you are trying to build with others together. You can't be saying yes to something that means saying no to another person that's holding that same container with you. In the case of parenting, it was me saying I can't be saying yes to my kid and saying no to myself. I have to figure out the way to say yes to my kid and yes to myself at the same time. And I tend to challenge business leaders when they say that's not possible, Faith. I'll say, well, we have the rover on Mars. So we've done really hard things. We can stay at the table long enough to figure out the bridge between your yes and my yes. It's just that we haven't stayed there long enough to work
Mm.
to build that bridge out. So in my case, that was the parenting arc. Yes to my son and the work that he needed, and yes to me, in a way that felt energizing and supportive. And I think the steps that I almost discerned from myself have become the steps that, although this isn't a case of parenting kids with chronic needs like autism, it really became about including yourself as a path to doing meaningful work, which then is the way that I support nonprofit leaders and so on. Most of these people are people who are open hearted. They want the world to just be, they want the utopia. And so the way to the utopia, whatever version of it that we get, is about really saying yes to the utopia for yourself in really honest and deep and supportive and nourishing ways. Because what we've been taught is sacrifice yourself for the mission. And so I'm saying, say yes to yourself and build that bridge to the yes to the mission. And let's hold that tension. Yes to you, yes to the mission.
Hmm.
So
That's
that's what
a
the book helped me do.
That's amazing. It's like I love the analogy that is often used in these cases is like the airplane safety videos where they're like, put on the mask for you because if you don't do that first, you are not able to help anyone else. You can't worry about your kid unless you're functioning in the best capacity that you can. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we can do our best with ourselves. And then when we're at our best, we can help people when we're at our best to help them at their best, right?
Yeah, and yet what happens for most of us, and I definitely in the case of parenting, is that, many parents said this to me and I've said it. My self-care is my kid doing well. Right? Because we are so tied, so enmeshed with the needs of our family that it does not feel good to be saying, I'm gonna go care for myself, I'm gonna make myself be best. And then so part of what we have to hold is I am not abandoning my child. I am actually holding my child while I'm caring for myself. And that feels counterintuitive sometimes. But again, let's go back to ancestors, let's go back to old culture. The amount, or even, you and I talked about our common links to Jamaica, the amount of people I've seen in markets with children tied onto their backs or children in their laps. There is a mindset that we can hold of care for self and care for community and make that up at the same time. And so once I start to try to invite people into care for yourself at the expense of the community, or even a sense of care for yourself and then we'll see if you can care for your child, it becomes a no, absolutely not. I'm gonna care for my child first, I'll die. Because so many of us have that, our love is big and we're not going to let that happen. So I think we just have to be, I've had to be careful and aware that it has to be a yes, yes at the same time. It's not a
Mm,
this then that, because it's not gonna fly for most of us. And we will just happily sacrifice ourselves.
yeah. The interesting thing is that now that society is so individualistic, in prior societies, like just go back even a few hundred years, it was all communal. So, how do we get back to this communal space of mutual aid and assistance in order to make sure that everyone can prosper as well as they can? Because individualism leads to, everyone fighting each other for all these scarce resources. But
Right,
if we all work together, we can make a society that works for everyone.
right. And the way to do that is, I mean, I think, again, people are already doing that. And part of it is honoring what we've already seen. So I grew up with my mother and my grandmother in informal banking systems where 8, 10 people came together, pooled their monies and saved. One person was the banker. People got distributions when they needed it. It was an entire system that I was able to see live. Tiny bank of 10 people and all around the world. So we act like the big systems that have been failing us are the only systems that exist. But all around the world, people have systems of care, of resourcing, uh, food, money, whatever it is, that are different, that we have called, whether we call them primitive or we call them not structured, or we say that they are flawed. while these big systems are failing most of us. And so my recommendation, regardless of the thing that we're trying to change, is create communities of 5 to 8 people and figure out how to do whatever the eight is. 5 to 8 people is a perfect team size. 5 to 8 people is a good board size. 5 to 8 people is an executive leadership type size. So if we can get anything to work with 5 to 8 people, it's the level of complexity. 2 people, you can kind of win on personality. 3 people, then you can figure something out. Once you get to 5 people, that level of complexity, you have to figure out collaboration and communal thinking and collective decision making and shared leadership. If that's what you want, you have to figure out how to communicate, how to navigate conflict and difference. 5 people is a perfect group for that, how to share resources. And so I say, let's do it. Treat your team not just as a little work group, but as a community of care. Where, yeah, we're doing this work, we're writing code or we're building a well or whatever, but we also are a community of people that we're going to care for each other. We're going to share ideas. We're going to build trust with each other. We're going to, and that will help us be able to expand this idea outside of these groups of 5 to 8 people.
Yeah. And any bigger than that, you get to the point where things become complex and you add layers of, decision making that become much harder to manage, because that's every organization that's a big organization. You're stacking levels of approval and all this stuff, and that's why they move so slowly. It's when you have these small dynamic teams that can work, on the fly in real time as we need them, that real progress can be made.
And when we build organizations that honor those decision making modules, that similar to how the body works, that we have clusters of decision making entities, and like my wrist has some, if we can kind of build these entities and then honor them in the larger entity versus go right back to hierarchical models where everything is structured a particular way. And, decisions are made up here and carried down here. If we can build the modules and have figure out how then those modules, so 5 6 modules, how do those modules work together. So if we have communities of 5 to 8, then we can ask the next question: how do those communities of 5 to 8 work together? And then how do those communities of 5 to 8 work together? You end up with something that's like a groundswell of collective care and collective consciousness versus something that you're trying to direct top down.
Hmm. I want to get back to the book. What made you decide on this name, the parenting like a ninja? What is the origins of that?
When I'd finished writing, people said to me, when you finish writing, the name will show up. Don't worry about it. Don't set the name ahead of time. And I think maybe I had the subtitle in my mind. It didn't have the right words for it, but I knew it was about this move to productivity for a mother. I started though to just ask autism parents, and we're can be a very close knit community. There's a lot of trust between autism parents who have kids that are similar, because of how hard it is to get trustworthy information um, in the medical establishment, maybe. So I reached out to a few people, and I'm like, what is this thing that we're doing? And we were like, it was special forces parenting. We were like, people were just tossing their ideas to me as to what does it feel like. And Ninja came up just as a kudos to our adaptability, to our stealth, maybe, because I've had moments where I am grabbing a thing from thin air. It's this thing, there's a catastrophe about to happen, and I stop people from harming themselves. And I was just like, yeah, the life we live 24/7 has trained us into yes, a hypervigilance on the negative side, but a hyper responsivity, a hyper awareness of what's happening in our environment, and an ability to kind of step in as needed. And so it was one of the dads who said, yeah, we're ninjas. And I was like, you're right. And so that was where that name came from.
Mm. Can you talk to the idea of like the community as far as promotion and getting the message of your book out there and how that has helped you?
Yeah, I think that I do lean heavily on relationships in all the work that I do. I think that um, people do things for people they like and love, and so part of what I did with the book, and the book for me was just a way to document my process, but also to share that with any parent who needed it. So I basically said, hey, I have a thing. If you want a copy, I have a copy. You can get it here, you can get it here. But people would reach out to me and just say, I heard you talk in this place, or I heard an episode of your podcast. You talked about your book. How can I get it? And then depending on who they were, honestly, I'd send them the advanced reader copy, the PDF on my desktop. I was like, here, sure, you want to read it? Because the point of it was just I wanted autism moms in particular to feel seen, to feel witnessed in the journey that they were on. And so if it sometimes I still have copies of the book in the closet and I might just throw one in the mail, people would go and get it. But the community, even when people didn't read the book, people trusted my word because they knew I had a common experience with them, and so they would tell other people about it. And whether it was parents, but sometimes it was other professionals who worked with kids like mine, and they would say, "Oh, I the new client I have," and then they would share the book and that kind of thing.
Do you think there's a benefit to having people not necessarily in those same exact shoes, just to, bridge that empathy gap from people who don't realize, oh, this is all the stuff that went into my journey and why it's so difficult to juggle all of these things and why I can't, sort of be in this space all the time when you ask me to. I need to have this time and space for myself and my child.
Yeah, I think books are great for bridging the empathy gap, but honestly, I think if empathy is the issue, people aren't going to finish a book. I think that the for the bridging of the empathy gap, the person who doesn't understand the story needs to seek people out. I would say to people would say to me, I don't understand what your life is like as a parent of a kid with autism. And I'm like, come ask me. So you can come ask me. You can stop by. We are all, I think, afraid of rejection and all kinds of things. So I said, if you want to know my day to day life, stop by. Yes, when you stop by, you run the risk that I will say, I can't talk to you right now. But you also have the possible opportunity of me saying, come inside. And then you will have an up close view. You always can have an up close view. And so I do think books are great credibility tools for those of us in a variety of the work that we do. But we know that most people aren't going to finish a book. And so, what we also need is a willingness of the people who are around us to come seek the experience of being closer. But we also need conversations like these because a person will listen to a snippet, a person will read a paragraph, a person will look at a few photos, and like, wow, really? So my son spells to communicate. He'll touch letters on a keyboard or on a stencil. And I don't go into a whole ton of the science behind how that works and all the things, but I'll just say, here is a poem that my son wrote, spelling it out. I was shocked as it was happening. And then that's a wow, your son can do that. That's a way for people to have quick awareness that then they can decide if they want to seek out more insight and build a bridge there if they want to.
Do you have anybody that influenced either the way that you write or the way that you tell stories?
Anybody that influenced? I think early when I was doing that communal blog, the originator of the blog had us using writing prompts from what was the name of this author? I'll find it and I can put it in the show notes. But it was this woman kind of dropped us into a little scene and you kind of played with it fast. And so I don't think it wasn't about style, it was about trusting what was inside of me and letting that be enough. So I tend to write in ways that are very experiential. I want to describe the what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling. when I'm doing my storytelling. And I try to access like my gut feeling, my gut, like, so when I start to over process in my head, then I lean back a little bit because that's just my
Mm,
perfectionist brain wanting to make it all smooth and sexy. And I was like,
yeah.
I want to, there's a thing underneath and I want to get to that. So that blog really helped me think that through a little bit because I wrote I wrote at least 100 blog posts over the course of a few years, writing twice a week. And I had to do them fast because I was full time, three small children at home. I couldn't be sitting down for hours writing. So
Mm. Did you do any editing with that? Or are you just putting it out there and just releasing it to the?
I wrote, I read it through one time and then I let it go.
Mm,
Because my position was that when we are talking to each other, like you're going to edit this a tiny bit, but my repeated words and my ums and things like that, they'll probably show. And we're already able to understand each other quite a bit without editing. And so I just decided that if I let editing stop me from expressing, then that would be a shame. So I have, at that time I did my best writing with very little editing. Then I got kind of, oh, I should, professional and da da da. And I think that's been a detraction from the ability to produce meaningful, emotionally connected work. Because I mean, some of us are, we're busy doing other things.
hmm.
I'm not spending my day writing or producing content. That's barely the focus of my life. And I think it's important for us to treat our writing and our expression in the same way that we treat conversations. I see a guy on the side of the street, a person on the side of the street, and I say something to them. I'm not going through a whole long vetting, structuring. I just speak what is in my heart to this person and receive what they have. And I think with the technology, we've kind of become caricatures, and so getting back to the heart of who we are, we do need to just express.
Yeah, I love that idea that you don't need to have the perfect way to say things, and just the fact that you have the ability to see the message is the most important part of this, because a lot of people are stopped just because, oh, it's not ready yet, it's not ready yet, let me put it off, let me have somebody look over it, let me do another round, let me do and that
Yeah,
can lead to just like paralysis, and you just stop
absolutely.
in your tracks and you're like, okay, never mind, this is not worth the time and effort. So it really depends on the person who is writing and what their needs and abilities are at any given
Yeah,
time, because
yeah,
it'll change over time and things will shift and stuff. So it's best to just recognize what you need in this particular moment to get your message out there.
yeah. But I'll say for my Substack that I'll be quiet for weeks, and I have 15 pieces in draft. And so I'm just saying there is something about whether it's the hierarchy of human value or the perfectionism that creates, that's moving against us and our willingness to just create art, just create messages that may be helpful. Because I'm like, why if I have 15 things in draft should I have nothing published in weeks? It's, so it's, I have a post that I'm gonna publish today or tomorrow, and I've had to just say I'm publishing it today. I'm going to just go in and I'm gonna and hit, right, versus this. Did I say it the right way? Am I going to, yeah, just put it out?
Yeah, sometimes the most raw and authentic version of what we have to say is the best way to say it, versus figuring out how to perfect it and make it sound like it's supposed to, right? Like it's supposed to sound. Because when we're just coming straight from emotion and from ourselves and what we're truly thinking, it's sometimes the best way to really convey the message, versus figuring out the best way to craft something so that it's like published ready or whatever it might be. And just like this day and age, it's we all have the ability to spread our message as quickly as it can be, but we often stop ourselves because of this need for perfection. What message would you like people to take away from your writing and your work?
Um, I think overall that you have the medicine you need. Often, whatever it is that's going on for us, we share goodness and medicine with other people, and we don't share it back with ourselves. And so when I, whether it is in with parents or I'm working with organizations, I'm trying to help people listen to themselves and hear the medicine that they offer into the world, and then take their own medicine. And I think that communally, if we were doing so, first of all, individually, we need to be doing that. But as communities, also, there is some communal goodness that we have that is being offered wherever, and that our communities would heal if we were all kind of taking the medicine that we have created for the thems, whether those thems are bosses and or again, people in the value hierarchy higher up, or it's people who are clients or whatever. And so, yeah, can we nourish ourselves? Can we love on ourselves enough to not be completely burnt out? Because our burnt out exhaustion is also part of what creates the system of harm, or what sustains the system of human harm. But if we can kind of really nourish ourselves and allow other people to care and nourish us, then I think could be pretty amazing, the kind of world we would create.
Hmm. Yeah, just working together to build a better world is what the ultimate goal should be. But there are just like forces that are stopping it through greed or what have you, that are really making it difficult to do that. But if we concentrate on ourselves and working together versus waiting for the system to change, it's just a very long process, I
And the
think.
world is too big. The world is just too big. Right? But the this little pocket of just us, 4, 5, 8, 10 people, that's a world. And that world we can change by
Mm,
nourishing ourselves, and together by nourishing that pocket, and that creates a difference for us. We become different, and then and you letting that spin out.
yeah. Do you know anyone that is a standout author themselves, and what do they do to stand out?
I there are a couple of people on Substack that I enjoy, and I think one of the things, it's their authenticity that I love. I mean, the turn of phrase is cute, and I love people who can put words together beautifully. But what's really behind that is uh, a steadiness of practice, but a kind of commitment to talking about what's really going on the inside for them, or how they're responding to what's going on in the world, or how they're responding to something in the media. It doesn't have to be serious stuff, but it is something that's real and nuanced. And it's not this is the top 3 steps for weight loss. It's the, wow, weight loss can be this or that or this or that depending on your age and stage, and my story with it. And it's something that's nuanced. And so I really enjoy people who are telling an authentic story, an emotional story, a nuanced story that's not simply categorized into these big boxes. And then, the quality of people's work is really a reflection of their practice, which is, like we were talking about, not just our crafting in secret, but our willingness to keep putting that story out and getting better as we do that.
Yeah, it's like a feedback loop of
Yeah, yeah,
connection and seeing what it is that we need to say, and if it's like connecting with other people, then we know we're on the right path. And if you don't ever publish your thing, then you'll never make it to the refining stage, because that's where we're all trying to be, is how do we best communicate our messages and get what we want to say out into the world, I think.
I also like authors whose minds, I don't want to say their minds look like mine, but for me, the things that are triggered in my mind is like I'll look at my cup and I'll be like, oh, these flowers are beautiful. And the flowers remind me of a drawing my kid did. How old was my kid? Oh, she was 4. There's a way that our stories are all connected, and they move, like an experience I'm having now connects to an old story, which connects to somewhere I want to go in the future. And I enjoy seeing that in other people's work because it makes them real to me. They're not kind of standing up in front of a room giving a lecture, but they are having an experience in the world, and then they're sharing that experience with me, and helping me follow the path that their mind and bodies went on as they engaged in whatever it was that they saw.
Yeah. Because anyone can give like a list of best ways
Top
to,
5.
or
Hmm.
hot takes on whatever the topic of the moment is, but it's really when you're connecting things to your own personal life story journey and all those things that people really find the connection, because it shows that they've taken thoughts and effort to really dissect the world in through the lens of their own lived experiences.
And I think that the willingness to tell our stories is the thing that helps the melting pot actually happen in the world, so that there is not the dominant narrative, but that we recognize that the human story is a bunch of lots of different types of stories. And it builds our capacity to hear a lot of different types of stories when each of us is able to tell our story, in a clear way.
Yeah. Can you give the people who are watching this a challenge that they can go forward with in order to make their message stand out and their words and all that?
Something that I'm trying to do for myself now, because at the point in time that I was writing more prolifically, it was just a communal commitment to write. I was dependent, other people depended on me, right? And so what I'm trying to do is to make commitments to write or create and be accountable to those. And that means having other people involved. And so whether that's, the November challenge of 500 words a day, but having the accountability for a couple of people and you doing it, or 500 words is really about 2 minutes speaking, 3 minutes speaking, maybe. So a 3-minute video a day, even if you don't share it, but just getting into that rhythm of creating it. What could we do in 30 days if we committed to every day or every weekday of some creative expression? And so I'm inviting myself into that right now. And I think that would be and creative, honest expression, something that feels a little bit risky. So if I write it and it feels like, oh, then yeah, I didn't go there. It needs to have a little bit of an edge that feels a tiny bit risky, so that I know I've gotten to somewhere authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah. The thing that works for the masses is often the thing that doesn't really connect with people on a deep level. So I think that's an important piece of like what parts of what I know of the world and can share with the world will deeply connect, and it's usually the moments of vulnerability.
Yeah, something that makes me feel a little bit vulnerable. I'm not you don't have to do a whole,
Overshare, yeah.
but I'm likely to overshare. But I'm not saying other people need to. But a little bit of vulnerability. How can we let that be seen in our creative expression, writing or speaking?
Awesome. Well, Faith, this has been amazing chatting with you. Can you let people know where they can find you and keep up to date with your work?
Sure. I'm in all the socials as Faith Clarke or Faith A. Clarke, and my website is faithclarke.com, or workecosystems.com. So you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for this lovely conversation, Kevin.
Okay, bye.